as one becomes older, a noticeable sign of aging is that no matter how much exercise you may do, the muscles begin to show signs of weakening and even deterioration. Therefore, mobility can become affected and muscle strength declines. I know this personal experience now. They say that stability is directly related to this decline in muscle strength. Of course, the central muscle, which determines life, the heart, also becomes a victim of this decline. All muscles seem to decline as age overtakes us. But the exception to this perhaps is the most powerful and strongest muscle contained within the body, the tongue. Of course, physically, the tongue is extremely vital, for without it, eating becomes virtually impossible. But it's also vital because it is a necessary muscle involved in speaking. Therefore, it is useful in their communications and relationships with others. This small muscle is so powerful, it can be extremely destructive and hurtful to not only oneself, but to others by what it relays through speech. It is the instrument which relays the direction of our mindset. James, in his epistle this morning, relates it as the small rudder of a ship. Although being very small, it controls the ship's direction. And James writes, quote, "Or look at ships. Though they are so large, it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs it. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits." End of quote. Therefore, the power of the tongue can be utilized to promote or project good, but also has the ability to spew evil, as illustrated by James. He says, "How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire." Now, the power of the tongue not only projects who we are, but how it affects others. The power of the tongue becomes extremely important for those who teach, those who lead, and those who have positions of influence. They have the extreme responsibility to protect the truth, as well as that which promotes the well-being of their audience. When they project hurtful and destructive thoughts, it is very clear what can happen. History, as well as current events, are proof of the hurtful, destructive, and even deadly consequences. But we need not to look beyond ourselves. We too have the capacity to show forth both sides of the tongue, as James indicates. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. Now, if we turn to the life of Jesus, we clearly see evidence of how the tongue can be damaging, while on the other hand, very constructive and even life-giving. Throughout his ministry, Jesus was the recipient of tongues of fire from those in authority. The scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, and even priests were attacking him with false claims, which eventually led the people to believe the charge of blasphemy, which led to the cross. Truth be known, though, Jesus also had very little good to say about the hypocrisy of those in authority. But Jesus' words were grounded in truth, whereas the authorities made up accusations which suited their own purposes. We haven't progressed very much, for such made-up accusations and lies still very much persist today, causing suffering and even death. Now, on the other hand, Jesus with his tongue healed people and also received positive reactions of the tongue from others. This is somewhat the situation when, after many months in closely following Jesus, the disciples found themselves with him in the region of Caesarea Philippi, which was a Gentile territory and the center of many pagan gods. Now, within these surroundings, Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" The answer which came back was John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. These were far from the ill-tongued words of the authorities. Then he got more personal. "But who do you say that I am?" Now, being impulsive and outspoken, Peter blurted out, "You are the Messiah." For Peter, this was the ultimate answer of a tongue of praise. But upon hearing this, Jesus ordered them not to tell anyone, nobody. Such big news. Why in the world would he tell them that? If he was the Messiah, he would want the support of everybody. Could it have been that he knew that they really misunderstood the true meaning of the Messiah, and thus who he really was? Peter, a Jew, knew the traditional meaning of the Messiah, which had a long history. It was a history which began centuries prior to Jesus. It was a history which saw the Messiah as God's appointed king who would lead the Jews to their new kingdom. Now, with such a concept of the Messiah, it was easy to see how the disciples and Peter came to misunderstand who this Jesus was. After all, they had seen one miracle after another, which only could have come through the power of God. Time and time again, they witnessed Jesus' action, which defied human reason and human capabilities. He even had given the power to heal. His powers and authorities over the human and natural conditions were beyond the powers of any human. Only a superhuman, operating out of the power and authority of God, could have done the things which Jesus did. So he was the closest example the disciples could have imagined to be the Messiah. They thought it would only be a matter of time before this Jesus would exercise his ultimate power and the kingdom of Israel would be reestablished. But Jesus knew, he was being misunderstood. And he knew he had to have more time in redefining the Messiah and his mission. Make no mistake, the misconception coming from the tongue of Peter was real and quickly became evident. Jesus, therefore, immediately began to teach them about the truth of who he was. He said, the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Whoa, wait a minute. This is not the Messiah we have longed for. He certainly isn't talking about himself. Maybe he's confused. Maybe he is playing a game with us. He has to stop the silly talk. It's very bad PR. Therefore, impulsive Peter pulled Jesus aside to let the other side of his tongue come forth in rebuking Jesus. What in the world are you doing? Are you in your right mind? That's not the Messiah you're talking about. Stop this ridiculous talk, for you are the true Messiah that we know. And in return, Jesus rebuked Peter. Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. In other words, don't try to tempt me to be what I am not. You have totally misunderstood who I am. And now you want to live up to your misunderstandings. I will not do that. You are the one who must open your mind as to who I really am. You must open your mind as to how God defines the Messiah, not your definition. You must understand God's kingdom is a spiritual kingdom which permeates all of life and goes well beyond earthly kingdoms. This is why I don't want you to go around spreading your misunderstanding until you really understand who I am. You must know the truth before unleashing your tongue. Now Jesus gathered his disciples and those who were following him, and he began to teach them what it meant to be a follower of this new concept of the Messiah. Such a follower must see life let's not see life just in terms of earthly glory or riches and power. They are to rather see life in terms of denial and the emphasis of all these earthly goals in order to gain the real importance of life, as found in the gospel of love. He stated, for those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. Now, Jesus, the Messiah, the Christ, is not to be misunderstood. His kingdom is not found in religiosities and social traditions and mores, but in living life itself in God's message of love and forgiveness. His kingdom is the way of life, It even isn't man's earthly institutions like the church. The church, its doctrines, teachings, and rituals are not in and of themselves Christianity, but are pathways to lead us to walk in God's way through Jesus' life and message. His kingdom is not to be falsely misrepresented by loose tongues proclaiming self-indulging ideologies. Our tongues need always seek to proclaim this kingdom of love. This is what we have been called to do through our baptism, and as experienced by Owen this morning. In his baptism, we all have the responsibility to see that he hears and sees this love through us. He needs us to help guide him away from misunderstandings to the truth as found in the gospel and as revealed to him through God's ever-presence. We must display the tongue of truth and love and not that of fire and misunderstandings. He is a child of God and needs to know what that means as his journey through life. This journey for him has just begun, and for us, it continues. Each of us need to share and receive the witness of love through how we control the power of our tongues. Amen.